Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the DD Geopolitics podcast. I am finally joined by the one and only Carl Za. I'm from Bali with a very unique time zone at the half hour point to talk to us about China. Welcome, Carl. How are you?
Hi, how are you? Nice to
Good.
meet
Thank
you.
you for asking. Nice to finally meet you. So, we're going to talk about the internal politics of China for a second, which I don't really think get enough discussion. Um, what can you tell us about currently what the political climate is inside of China? Everybody that I talk to from China always is like, I'm content, I'm happy, things are great. But what's going on? And now we have a little bit of tumult in the Xinjiang area and that kind of thing. So, what is going on with China right now, currently?
Actually, there's not much turmoil in Xinjiang right now. There was back 10 years ago, say a period between 2000 all the way through 2010s, particularly bad around 2014, around the time when ISIS in Syria was, looks like they're going to take over. That was the worst time. But now, this is why there was a strong security response from the Chinese state, in particularly from 2014 all the way to 2018. But that is all over. Like right now, people look at the media, they will say, "Oh, there's 1 million Uyghur in Chinese camp." That's totally not true because first of all the 1 million figure that was thrown out by a NED funded uh, China Human Rights Defender organization. For that, they were the first to come out with that figure, and they based on their study on supposedly interview with 8 Uyghur villagers from counties surrounding Kashgar, and 8 Uyghurs are from 8 villages. And based on their supposedly testimonial, they did extrapolation. They extrapolated about 10% of the village were sent to re-education, and then they extrapolated from those 8 villages to the entire population of Xinjiang. So that's how they got, there are so there's like 11 million Uyghurs in Xinjiang. So they're like 10% from those 8 villages. That means 1 million Uyghurs must be in camps. This is completely BS. But China did have re-educational de-radicalization centers in Xinjiang because China in Xinjiang experienced a series of terrorist attacks like I said, from 2000s all the way to 2015. What happened was the goal of these de-radicalization centers is always to integrate people back into the society after a couple of years. So in 2019, in I think the June of 2019, the Chinese government has announced all the re-education centers has been closed. All the de-radicalization centers has been closed. So right now there's no camps, and Xinjiang is actually have been calmness since the 2010s. And so but for Chinese internal politics, I know a lot of people don't really understand how it works, but I would just let's just contrast it with United States. Many people are familiar with United States. So Obama, before he became the president of the United States, what did he do? He was a senator, right, from Illinois. But before he was senator in Illinois, what was his job? What was job qualification? He was a community organizer in Chicago, right? So basically, the DNC, the Democratic establishment, handpicked him, put him, made him, got him to the senator position in Illinois, and later a faction of DNC, that didn't like Hillary, propelled Obama to be the Democratic candidate, and because Obama has a nice presentable face, He wears a civil face of the American empire, so that's why he was chosen. Now let's talk about, or even look at today, right? United States now in 2024 election, we're facing with choice between either Biden or Trump. What a great choice, democratic choice we have. But in China, it works a little bit different. If you look at Xi Jinping's career, he started at the grassroots level. He started when he graduated. He started as a party secretary at a rural village, and he worked his way up the ladder. Later he became promoted to the county level, and then prefecture level, and eventually provincial level. So he worked all over China. He started out as a party secretary in a rural village in northern China, and he climbed his way up, and eventually he was made a party secretary of the city of Xiamen, on a Chinese city on the Taiwan Strait, opposite of Taiwan, and from there he later became the provincial party secretary of the entire Fujian province. So that's a leadership selection process for the Chinese leadership. They have to work their way from the bottom, so they know how it functions, how the state machine functions at each rung of at each level, and so by the time that Xi Jinping became the president of China, he has a pretty good idea of each part of different parts of China, and as well as how things work at different level. You can't say the same thing about United States. Now, U.S. we just have career politicians, and and they're just paid and bought for by by special interest. This is why U.S. right now, nobody in U.S. can say anything other than supporting Israel. Anybody who hopes to be a serious candidate for either the presidency or the Congress, they all have to be rah-rah Israel. So that's the reality of United States. Whereas in China, that's not the case, because U.S. is fundamentally a society, a government that's set up for the oligarchs, right? I like to say the U.S. has the best politician that money can buy, but in China it's different, because the Chinese state has always kept the merchant class on a very tight leash. That was true even back in the imperial days. The Confucian bureaucracy always kept the merchant class down, make sure they don't get too uppity. And this has translated into the modern day China. The Communist Party still hold the ultimate power. They will not let billionaires like Jack Ma to dictate policy. In United States, billionaires, either Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, they can buy the entire media chain, media platform, and they can fund lobbies and think tanks to influence policy. In China, that's not the case. Jack Ma, he can't even own newspaper on mainland China. He has to go to Hong Kong to buy the South China Morning Post. But he ultimately, when Jack Ma's Alibaba trying to branch out to financial sectors, which Chinese state regulates, he got slapped down, because that just not allowed. So the difference is the capital has to bend its will to the Chinese state in China, but whereas in the United States, the capital dictate policy. It's just a matter of, like right now we have different parties battling out in the United States, but in the background, it's just a different. They're different donors of different billionaires fighting for a piece of the larger pie. I hope that makes sense. Feel free to ask me any questions or comments.
It does make sense, but I want to go back to the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, because it seems that every time we kind of have sort of tumult, controversy in the Muslim world, this sort of Uyghur storyline pops up. So what happened the other day is that the IRGC did bomb the Turkestan Islamic Party of Syria, which is directly associated with Xinjiang and the Uyghurs. What I've been trying to explain to people is that this is not. This is actually a Western-backed, Western-sponsored sort of terrorist group aimed to actually create anti-China, foment anti-China rhetoric inside of the Muslim community. Can you shed some more light on that as someone who's very much experienced in China?
And as far as I can see, it's not really the Western-backed propaganda on the so-called Uyghur genocide story is not taking roots in Muslim majority countries, because many of the Muslim majority countries in the world still support China. They even openly support China on its Xinjiang policies, and then you just get all these Anglophone media. It's like, why the Muslim countries not condemning China, but condemning Israel? I mean, come on, guys. This is, world just doesn't function like, you can't just wish it into existence. And what this atrocity propaganda works very well is on the Western audience, including even Muslim diaspora in the West, because they live in the West, so they're constantly exposed to the same Western propaganda. I like to say U.S. has the most propagandized population in the world, because people live in China or former Soviet Union. They understand the state media is a mouthpiece for the state, so they know how to read the news, right? Whereas people in the West, they assume they have free media, right? Which is anything far from the truth. So a lot of times they kind of uncritically accept. I mean, now people are wising up. People are, the mainstream media is.
Did you see Andrew Tate's tweet about watching CGTN? So now we've got all of these kind of which is great, as a blessing and a curse. But now you kind of have all of these manosphere followers that are now like, "What's up with Chinese media? Like, what's going on?" So that was kind of.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, you give CGTN extra exposure, and personally, I consider CGTN a bit dull, because a lot of the time they're just presenting facts, because
that's what we say. Right? Yes, it's all factual, but like that CGTN is like the most boring one. But then you get the anchors off CGTN, and they are wild. They are like some of the most outspoken commentators, and they're great. So it's really refreshing to see someone like Andrew Tate, especially now that Jackson's sort of traveling through China and opening up that door. And I have somebody like Andrew Tate mentioning CGTN. While I don't really traverse in those circles, I was like, this is actually really cool. This is really good for China, especially since Tate has kind of worked with Syria, the actual Syria, not the terrorist Syria. And now,
I mean, a lot of people, DM me, say, you shouldn't retweet Andrew Tate. Because I'm like, look, man, it's all about. There's no bad publicity. I mean, if anything, this gives publicity to Chinese state media, to CGTN. It might draw people who otherwise wouldn't have been exposed to CGTN or anything from the Chinese side. Now maybe they have a little spark of curiosity to look up. I mean, I don't care for Andrew Tate or whoever, but what they're doing, it's a conduit, it's a vehicle, it's a gateway drugs to introduce a different perspective to a whole new segment of the population.
Andrew Tate is the gateway drug to China.
Yeah, exactly. This is like it's like anyway. So this is why I used to say, like, anime and K-pop are the gateway to Chinese culture ultimately, because like people outside, they don't really can't tell the difference between East Asians anyway. So eventually they will discover the Chinese cultural products. But anyway, so I'm getting off tangent, but I like to talk about but going back to the Uyghur issue. So Seymour Hersh, a famous American journalist who exposed the My Lai massacre in Vietnam and many others. He wrote a article back in the 2010s called "The Rat Line," exposing the CIA's, the biggest CIA operation after Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, CIA carried out Operation Cyclone to enable the Mujahideens to fight the Soviets. That's well known, but less well known is the biggest CIA operation after Operation Cyclone, the one now that was happening in Syria during the Syrian war, called Operation Sycamore. And Operation Sycamore is getting funnel jihadists from all over the world to Syria to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. And they first they pipe all the jihadists from Libya who they encouraged to overthrow Gaddafi. And supply them with weapons and ship them to Syria, and all these Western intelligence agencies, send all these extremist groups in their own country in Western Europe, who they have been monitoring for years, to allow them to go to Syria, have safe passage to Syria and Iraq, and join ISIS. But there's another rat line to Syria that very few people know about, to the point that so far I only know one mainstream media, I think it's either Reuters or Washington Post, that had reported on this. There was a line to funnel Uyghur jihadists from Xinjiang to Syria. So this happened around the 2010s. And a lot of at that time, because of the increasing terrorist attack in Xinjiang, so the Chinese state start to crack down. And what they first did is they sealed the borders along all around Xinjiang, the border of Xinjiang, along with the Central Asian republics and Pakistan. And then, but a lot of the extremist Uyghurs are looking to get out. And what they did was, because China built this amazing infrastructure, they just hop on the high-speed train to travel to a different part of China, to Southwest China. Because Southwest China, especially the border with Vietnam, Laos, Myanmar, the area called Golden Triangle, it's pretty porous. And so the people, a lot of the extremist Uyghurs, they would take their entire families to travel to southwestern region of China, cross over the border that goes through Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and eventually they reach the Turkish consulate in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur. And at that time, this was before the U.S. Assisted coup against Erdogan. So back in the early phase of Syrian war, Turkey was firmly aligned with United States as well as UAE and Saudi to overthrow Assad. So at that time, the Turkish consulate in Kuala Lumpur will provide authentic Turkish passport to any Uyghurs who stop by, and that will enable them to fly from Kuala Lumpur to Istanbul. But right as soon as they step off the plane, they will be greeted by the jihadist recruiters who urge them on to go to Syria, to settle in the Idlib province. That's like the basically the headquarters of all these various striped so-called free Syria,
Free Syrian army. Yeah, they're going to
free Syrian army, but really controlled by Al Qaeda. You mentioned the Turkestan Islamic Party. So the Turkestan Islamic Party, they are Uyghur jihadist outfit that was based in Afghanistan. It was created during. It came together during the first CIA Operation Cyclone, to enable Mujahideens to overthrow the Soviet. But because around that time, 1979, around the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, there was a new road opened up between China and Pakistan, the Karakoram Highway. So, and China was also opening up. So goods are flowing, but also people. A lot of young Uyghurs were traveling on Karakoram Freeway to Pakistan, where they would tend to. Some of them attended the Saudi financed build madrasas along Pakistan-Afghanistan border for the Afghan refugees to radicalize them. So these radicalized Uyghurs will head over to Afghanistan to fight the Soviet army. And eventually they form a group called, at various times they have different names, like East Turkestan Islamic Movement, or but now their current name is Turkestan Islamic Party. And they are they joined the Al Qaeda network. In fact, the head of the Turkestan Islamic Party, he sits on the High Shura Council of Al Qaeda, right? So these Al Qaeda guys, they are, as part of the Al Qaeda's a plan to send their fighter to Syria. So they had this network to funnel extremist Uyghurs from China to Syria, and they had, people estimated there's anywhere between like 5,000 Uyghur fighters, and together with their family making up, like some say 10-20,000 Uyghur people in Idlib. And these are the people that Iran missile bombed recently, and it wasn't Iran. You know, United States used to bomb Turkestan Islamic Party in Afghanistan. You can look it up. You know, people can Google it. But guess what? Guess what Pompeo did? Pompeo took the so back in 2000, U.S. U.S. and China, when after Iraq war started, after 9/11, George Bush went to Beijing. People don't remember. People have such short memory span. But I'm old. Yeah, I'm old enough to remember. Just before 9/11, China and U.S. was already on collision course. There was a 2001 Hainan spy plane incident when a U.S. spy plane was buzzing around Chinese coast and collided with a Chinese fighter jet, and eventually the U.S. spy plane was forced to land on Chinese military base on Highland Island, and that was such a big, people in the United States went crazy. They're saying like China is holding this pilots hostage and all that, and so all that tension it got redirected when 9/11 happened. So after 9/11, George Bush went to China, tried to patch up the relationship with China. And one of the deals that we worked out was China's demand was United States to put East Turkestan Islamic Movement on the terrorist list. So that happened. And they stayed on the terrorist list for years. And until Mike Pompeo said, no, they're not terrorist group anymore. So now Turkestan Islamic Party is no longer classified as a terrorist group by the United States, even though it's part of the Al Qaeda network and its leader sits on the highest Al Qaeda council. So that's how it works. I mean, and then we are, and again, I remember when Israel started bombing. This was before October 7th. This was, back when every time, because Israel has been bombing Gaza for a while, and back when every time Israel is doing something in Gaza or doing something Al-Aqsa Mosque, suddenly you will see all the Western major mainstream media news network will come out with a story. China has turned Xinjiang into the world's largest open air prison. I mean, this is so obvious because everybody knows Gaza is the world's largest open air prison. So then every time something happens in Gaza, they will come out with stories about Xinjiang, right? This is I mean, for people who know, this is so obvious what they're trying to
Yes,
do.
exactly.
They're just but it's the thing about China is it's so remote. It's a different civilization. So even though people today in the United States have started to see through all the bullshit put out about mainstream media, especially on the domestic agendas, because people are more familiar with U.S. domestic context, political context, and even about Latin America, because Latin America is closer to the United States, of people and closer cultural context. A lot of people speak Spanish, and people will understand that U.S. have been spreading lies about Cuba, about Venezuela, but when it comes to China, people in the United States just swallow all the State Department propaganda, hook, line, and sinker. Because, I mean, one is because they really don't have any context. All the information they receive from China is either mainstream media or all these news YouTubers who are probably sponsored by NED groups or Falun Gong, or they get their news from Falun Gong cults, right? Like China Uncensored is one of the biggest YouTube channel that's operated by Falun Gong, right? It's Falun Gong,
Yeah.
for people who don't know, is the same cult that promotes the Sen Yun dance performance called the communism before China before communism. They have Sen Yun posters all over the United States.
Yeah, the ballet. I
Yeah.
almost went just for fun, but it was so. I took so many pictures of those posters. I was like, "What is this?" I
Yeah,
was like, "We
and
have to go."
so I always wonder, right? How do these people have so much money? Because even among the Chinese diaspora, they're such a fringe group. So I always wonder how they get so much money to have like a multi-million-dollar media empire and have all these, pay for all these advertisement and send all these free Falun Gong. The Epic Times. Now Epic Times is blowing up in the United States too.
Yeah.
So and how did they have money to fund all this? And my friend Yasha Levine actually filed a Freedom of Information Act several years ago. I think it was back in 2018 when he was writing his book, like Surveillance Valley, the military origin of the internet. And it turns out Falun Gong's media empire is funded by U.S. government. Surprise, surprise! It was
Israel, but
yeah,
really,
it
I mean,
was-
it's the same thing. It's the same thing.
it's the same thing. It was founded back then. It was called BGG, Board Broadcasting Governor or something. But now it got a rename. Now it's called the U.S. Agency for Global Media. And guess what other channels the U.S. Agency for Global Media funds? It funds Voice America. It funds Radio Free Asia, Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Liberty, and yes. So I mean, this is a freaking CIA cutout, right? It funds all these freaking CIA cutout because but again, people in the United States, because there's so little like just even objective news about China in the United States.
Yeah.
The information and all the info channels about China is heavily polluted, right? And that's why I highly encourage people just to travel to China.
I know so many people that go frequently, and I know people that have moved there from the United States, and everybody says the same thing. They either can't wait to go back or they don't leave. My good friend Mike is in she's in Shanghai, and he's like, I'm never coming back to America. He's half African American. He's like, I'm never coming back. This is the future. He is so happy. Everybody I talk to, even the Chinese citizens, and of course the CPC bot, whatever. But even they, all of the time, they love it. And I know people all over the country. I'm really glad you brought up the fact that the Uyghurs become a very serious topic of discussion every time something happens in Palestine, because we start to see, especially we mentioned Syria and Iran. We've seen China really build up nice, solid relations with Syria and Iran, especially over this summer. With my dog is just a little out of control, but especially Syria with Assad visiting with his wife, and China negotiating that peace between Saudi and Iran. Now we're seeing Iran and Pakistan work together, which to me seems like it's definitely in China's best interest for Iran and Pakistan to work together. And then the Uyghur sort of rhetoric really amps up to start discrediting journalists. Danny Haifong, myself, Samira Khan, you, Jackson Hinkle are all now kind of targeted as these genocide deniers. And I'm like, what genocide are we denying? Because
yes, I am a genocide denier because there's no genocide in Xinjiang. I mean, come on. But like the thing is, a lot of these people crying for supposedly for Uyghur genocide are the same people who will deny that there's genocide taking place in Palestine. I mean, like this is, I mean, how, I don't know how people could miss this. There's a lot of these same people, like several tweets down the line, they will be like, "Oh, Israel is doing a good job." Like,
exactly.
Like
exactly. And sometimes it's people that are very pro-Palestine that are doing it. And I'm like, well, you already know that they won't call Gaza a genocide, even though we know that that's a genocide. But they are very ready to call the Xinjiang a genocide without any sort of visual proof. Understand why things are accepted as genocides and why things aren't. Like genocide is really just a propaganda term at this point, utilized by.
You have right now. We just recently had a TV clip from the ITV. I give them prop for that. They actually caught on camera Israeli sniper shooting a Palestinian civilian holding a white flag on the open street. Right? We have so much. We have so much footage of Israeli atrocities committed in Gaza. Yet, where's the video footage of Chinese People's Liberation Army bombing buildings in Xinjiang? Right? Where do you see like the refugee camp says around China's borders, around Xinjiang borders? Right? I mean, like where again? People should just travel to China. Like Xinjiang is not even a restricted region. Anybody who has a valid visa to China can travel to Xinjiang. It's open to visit for anybody has a visa to China. And right now, China is actually losing. They're trying to open up a visa restrictions for a lot of the countries. They have what's it called, the 144-hour transit visa, which means for a lot of the major Chinese cities, you can go there for a week without visa. You can now go spend a week in Shanghai without visa, as long as you have you show like a round trip ticket, you have a return ticket, you are leaving at the end of the 6 days, then you can go there without visa. I mean, that's super. And China already have unilaterally given a free visa to citizens from France, Germany, Italy, there's Malaysia, Singapore, and I'm hoping Indonesia, because my wife is Indonesian, and I already have 10-year multiple entry visa for China, so I'm hoping they extend to Indonesia so I can just bring my wife and my family to visit. But I highly urge people just visit China, because seeing is believing. No matter what I say here, people will see my face and say, "Oh, Carl is a CCP propagandist, or he's a shell for the Chinese government." Don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for it. Just go to China and see for yourself, and let your eyes deceive you. Don't listen to my words. Because I know, like, right now it gotten so bad, just like because for a lot of the Americans, I'm wearing the face of the enemy, right? So it doesn't matter what I say; it's all like propaganda to them. But just go visit China. Just go visit China. You will dispel a lot of your misconceptions, a lot of your prejudices, and actually open your eyes to new possibilities.
I usually, when they call me a CCP bot, I correct them to CPC, and then I say thank you, because if I'm doing this on a volunteer basis, and I must be doing a very great, amazing job. So
having said that, if President Xi Jinping, if you're watching this, I am not opposed to take in Xi bucks. Please just
Yes.
deposit to my bank account.
Yes.
I could make some. I could use some money.
I'll even take a travel visa. I'm very cheap date. Just get me a plane ticket and a travel visa. I'm very happy to go anywhere in China, even in the snow. We love the snow at DDG. Just send us anywhere. We're ready. You need us to be a talking head for Russia or China. We are available. We're already doing it for free. Just give us the plane ticket and some food. We're happy. So I do want to talk about how the genocide, I don't even know what to call it anymore. It's not even right to call it a genocide, conflict, something happening in Gaza and Israel. What is the overall kind of policy of China towards this sort of thing? I know they're very pragmatic and they're very quiet, and they kind of have to watch themselves and how they vote in sort of UN votes, because they don't want to validate or anything like that, like the ICJ and all of that. So they're being very pragmatic, like China is. I like to say about China, their policy is do nothing and win, because China kind of just sits back while everybody else is like messing up. But I do want to know what China's stance is and their relationship is.
So China's official stance has always been very consistent, is to support a Palestinian state. And China actually used to be very proactive. During the Mao's era, China would send weapons to Palestinian resistance group, and they would invite Palestinian fighters to China to train. And you can Google on internet, you will see like back in the 60s, 70s, a Palestinian resistance fighter holding the little Mao book. The little, because back then Mao believed in the world revolution. He believed in founding the various national liberation movement all across the world. That changed. So when I grew up, I was full disclosure, I was born in China in 1976 just after Mao died, and I spent the entire decade of 80s growing up in China. So when I lived in China, China didn't recognize Israel. China only recognized Palestine, and China had the Palestinian PLO office in Beijing. And growing up, I would watch on TV like Arafat visits to China all the time, and that policy only changed in 1992. So there's several factors. One, after 1989, the student protests in Tiananmen, China faced diplomatic isolation by the West, and so China was trying to break through its diplomatic isolation. Before when I lived in China, China didn't have diplomatic relationship with Israel. China didn't have diplomatic relationship with Saudi Arabia. China did not have diplomatic relationship with apartheid South Africa, but after Cold War ended, things happened. Apartheid ended in South Africa, so China established relationship with South Africa. China started branching out, China established relationship with Saudi Arabia in early 1990s. And China established relationship with Singapore, with Indonesia, all these formerly anti-communist countries, and then 1992 is also when the Oslo Accord was signed between Palestinian Authority and Israel, and then only after that China recognized Israel. Like China can't be more pro-Palestine than Palestinians, right? If Palestine was ready to sit down to discuss two-state solution with Israel, then China is obviously not going to be opposing that. So it's only after the Oslo Accord, 1992, China finally recognized the state of Israel. And for a while, China tried to develop a relationship with Israel. You said China's diplomacy is pragmatic. It is. China had an excellent relationship in the Middle East with Iran, with Saudi Arabia, with Israel at the same time, until recently. And so, because China's diplomacy is always like, we're not going to tell you what to do. We respect sovereignty. Your business is your business. let's just all get together and do business. But at the same time, China has always reiterated its support for the Palestinian statehood. Like when Xi Jinping went to the Arab League, when he, I think this was a few years back, and when he reiterated that China's support for Palestinian state, a lot of people are shocked, and I was like, why would you be shocked? He didn't actually change China's official policy. The support for Palestinian state has been official Chinese policy from the very beginning. Nothing has changed. Only thing that changed was China's recognition of Israel in 1992. That together also, at the time, I say it's part of China's trying to break out of diplomatic isolation. Also around 1992, I think, was when China finally established relationship with South Korea. So before, when I lived in China in 1980s, China didn't recognize South Korea, China didn't recognize Saudi Arabia, China didn't recognize Israel, China didn't recognize apartheid South Africa. Things. So in the post 90s, I think, post 90s, China's foreign policy is very pragmatic. It's basically, let's just do business. Well, your business is your business. But China always supported Palestine, and this has been reaffirmed by the Palestinian by the Palestinian Authority statement on China's support. So at this particular juncture, people will point to, but China is doing, why is China investing Haifa port in Israel and blah blah blah. That has always, China's policy has always been doing business with officially UN recognized countries. And if this ties into Yemen, people will ask why China is not recognizing Ansar Allah government in Yemen, because this one reason is because China only recognizes the countries as recognized by UN. So for reasons we all know, it's a solidly supported government in southern Yemen that's been recognized as the official government of Yemen. So that's a reason China is not officially recognizing Ansar Allah. But that might change. That might change.
Talk about that a little bit. Do they have any relations with Ansar Allah or the Yemeni armed forces? Because what we see, and I think we have a nice little collage, is that the no more Houthis, guys. Stop saying Houthis. Ansar Allah has blocked Bab el-Mandeb, but look at this. They just have to say all the crew is Chinese crew, Chinese ship. So what is the relations with? I know that their policy is not to allow anybody that's supporting Israel or directly doing business with Israel. But is there any other relation between China and the Yemeni armed forces, like with Iran? They're supplying them arms.
See, that's a good. So at first, now I'm gonna add maybe it sounds like I'm backtracking. I said China only do business with UN recognized countries, but that might be changing. One example is Afghanistan, right? Because post-American withdrawal, the Taliban-controlled Afghan government is still didn't gain wide international recognition. I think only a couple countries like Saudi Arabia or UAE or something recognize Taliban as a legitimate government of Afghanistan. But China right now is investing in Afghanistan. China is sending official aid to Afghanistan. China has a lot of contact with the Taliban government right now. The one interest is having Taliban to keep a lid on the remaining Uyghur fighters of the Turkestan Islamic Party that's still on the Afghan soil. That's one of China's primary concern. But also China just want to see a stable neighborhood. And so the fact that China and Taliban right now have a working relationship, because you've seen the Taliban representative in Beijing in talks with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. So I let me take back what I said about China not only doing business with UN recognized country. So it's interesting what's evolved. China's foreign policy is always evolving, right? So and what happened in Yemen is interesting because Costco, the Chinese shipping giant, they announced they suspended all shipping to Israel. And the Houthi blockade of Red Sea is not a blockade against all shipping. They specifically said is to blockade shipping to Israel. So China stopped shipping to Israel. So Chinese ship have no problem go through Red Sea. I mean, it's simple. It's simple. All you have to do to go through Red Sea is to say we are not going to Israel, right? I mean, like United States, of course, U.S. can't do that, but China can. And China do have good relationship with Iran, which some in Washington say is the main sponsor of Ansar Allah in Yemen. So I mean, but which means China do have a back channel to talk to the Yemeni forces,
Right.
And so I mean, so there's and I would not be surprised if there's some, like they have to work out some protocol, like okay, so they're like, okay, Chinese, you can go through.
Yeah, it's China. It looks like it's China and Russia.
Did you see that the Financial Times article that said United States right now is asking China for help to stop the Yemeni attack on Red Sea? It's like, why China is helping by showing you an example to move forward. China is helping by saying we're going to stop shipping to Israel, and that allow us to ship through Red Sea. So you just have to follow China's example. Don't ship to Israel, no problem.
So China already is helping. They don't even need to ask. I loved that headline. I put it on Twitter so fast, and I was like, China, please help us. And China's just like, no.
And this is United States do the same kind of shit, with like the Russian sanction. They're like, China, why won't you please sanction Russia? Like, what, you think the Chinese are stupid? You already declared China as the number one enemy, and it's so obvious after you finish off Russia, China is gonna next. So wait, you're asking us to help you finish with Russia, to finish with Yemen, so you can concentrate on China? You think we're stupid? I mean, like, U.S. government is run by a bunch of jokers and a bunch of idiots, and but the problem is they expect everybody else to be idiots too. That's why the U.S. empire is struggling right now. We just don't have good human resources.
You have no idea. I like them sending Henry Kissinger when he's 100 years old and needs like emergency services the whole way. I was like, what is happening to the United States? And then he died, and I was like, well, there goes any relations with China.
I was like, they had like literally an ambulance parked outside where he was holding a talk with the Chinese leaders in the Great Hall of the People. They have Henry Kissinger's ambulance parked outside. I was like, wow, they literally sent this old man on life support to help to break ice with China.
Really a big metaphor for the United States. We're literally on life support, begging Xi, please help us. It's bad when we're sending Janet Yellen and then we say, wait, that didn't work. Let's send Henry Kissinger's corpse to China.
Janet Yellen enjoyed her trip, though. I mean, she loved the mushrooms, and like
she loved the mushrooms. She got a little high. She did a very
and like people are like, why is she like? People in the United States are offended. She's like bowing repeatedly. Like, look, she's going to her debtor, right? She's going to borrow money. You have to show some sort of appreciation for the people who loan you money.
Poor Xi is just standing there as this very strange woman just keeps bowing, and
I mean, it's like why do that? Like, and this is why when Wang Yi says Western people can't tell the difference between Chinese, Korean, and Japanese.
No.
Like all these mainstream pundits go offended. Oh, Wang Yi is a racist. No, he's just speaking the truth, man. It's like it's true.
Speaking of Korean, before we lose and run out of time, speaking of Korea, North Korea, how they are now, North Korea is always my favorite. I love North Korea, but they're talking about reunification, and they've had a lot of movement inside of South Korea that's suggesting that they also love the idea of reunification. And of course, we have Kim's sister, my spirit animal, but they're kind of, I think everybody kind of sees the West as weak. Can we rectify the wrongs that have been done to us? And what do you think about North Korean reunification, and how does it look through the lens of China?
So, a lot of people, I say people swallow the State Department lines on China. I mean, it's like 100 times worse when it comes to North Korea, right? Because one thing, it's still harder to travel to North Korea. Like United States, after the Won buyer business, now United States citizens can't even travel to North Korea. Like I can't travel to North Korea. Unless like somebody from Taiwan marry me and give me a Taiwan passport. And but anyway, so
Don't marry anyone from Taiwan.
No, I talk about like Xiang Yu, my friend Xiang Yu joked that we can fake a gay marriage, because Taiwan recognized gay marriage, so we can fake a gay marriage so I can get my Taiwan resident card, and because the Taiwan resident, because mainland China, because China recognized Taiwan as part of China, so anybody on Taiwan, they can get a special pass to allow them to basically function as Chinese citizens on mainland China. So that's all I want. I was like, okay, let's fake a gay marriage so I can get my Taiwan resident card. So that will allow me to go to mainland China, travel freely to mainland China.
Well, myself, and I think I speak for all of my listeners when I say, if you fake a gay marriage to get to North Korea, nobody will judge you for that. Just go right ahead to North Korea. Because at least somebody can go, I'm dying to go to North Korea. Like, if it's good enough for Putin, it's good enough for me. I'm on my way. Like, I'm very excited for North Korea. I don't remember the book, but I'll put it in the comments or the description. But there's a book that written by a Westerner that's fantastic about North Korea, and that's literally what got me like over this hump, because we don't learn about the Korean War. It's treated like a very insignificant war in the United States, just because there was not a lot of fanfare. It was like in the aftermath of World War II.
We don't want to talk about it because we got our
ass
US got its ass kicked. Yeah, I mean, like so okay, it's a forgotten war.
It really is. It really, really is. And you don't really. There's nobody that says I'm a North Korean war vet. There's none of that, like the Vietnam or World War II. So understanding what really happened, it really put a terrible taste in my mouth for South Korea, and understanding why Korean unification of the peninsula was cut, why it couldn't happen, and why it was used as a cudgel against China.
Yeah. I mean, people in United States like, oh, U.S. went in to save a democracy.
Yeah,
it's like South Korea in 1940, in 1950 was not democracy. Who told you that? South Korea has functioned as a military dictatorship
literally
until the 1980s. 1998. And the people who were in the government in South Korea for most of the time were like former Japanese collaborators.
Yes.
and when there was actually a vote, because after World War II, Korea was divided between the Soviet occupied zone and U.S. Actually, the agreement was decided in the Yalta Conference. The Korean Peninsula will be, northern half will be Soviet and the southern half will be U.S. occupied. But it was supposed to be temporary. And when the Soviet Union launched the August Storm and they went into Manchuria to crush the Japanese Guangdong Army, they were able to arrive in Korean Peninsula pretty quickly. They could have If they wanted to, they could have just pushed through and take the whole Korean peninsula, but they abided by the prior agreement with United States by stopping at the 38th parallel, right? So that allowed later U.S. to come in, and when the U.S. come in, it's like, well, I think the best way forward is to keep all the Japanese collaborators in place to help us to run this place. So, I mean, obviously, that wasn't very popular. That's not what people in Korea expected when they're being liberated. When like, why is it still same people in charge? And there was actually a vote for like a republic, People's Republic Korea that was like, the entire unified Korea. But guess what? United States government disbanded that organization. They sent them. They sent the North. It's like you can't operate here. We got a nice gig going on. We got a functional. Like all these like nice colonial collaborators keeping the whole structure going on. And that so Korean War was a civil war. No matter how you spin it, people are trying to say, oh, because it's a U.S. trying to deter North Korean aggression. No. This is a civil war. This is a civil war. It's just like Korean War is no different from Vietnam War. This is a national liberation. It's a war of national liberation, and U.S. is just U.S. is stepping, because at that time U.S. is all about stopping communism. It's like, okay, communism, like it's a domino theory. Okay, if they're going to take all Koreans are going to move on to Japan, we can't allow that because Japan is our precious. But nobody can and then people don't know, but Curtis LeMay, the U.S. Air Force general, we ran out of target in North Korea. We ran out of target. We bombed all the cities, all the public infrastructure, all the power plants, all the dams. We have nothing left to bomb. And people in the United States never heard about it. They don't understand, like, millions of people has been killed by U.S. bombing. And there was a story. I was watching a documentary about this Chinese Air Force general who was a commander of the Chinese Air Force in the 1980s. He was one of the first pilot in the Chinese Air Force, and because his mom, so he fought in the Korean War, and he flew against America in the Korean War. But because his mom was Russian, so he looks white. So he got shot down over near the 38th parallel. And when he parachuted and landed in a North Korean village, so because his Western features, everybody thought he was American. So they start beating on him because like the villagers are so angry at the American pilots who are constantly bombing them. And so they all pile on him and start beating him. And he was only saved by and like a North Korean officer came by just in time, and because the North Korean officer speaks Chinese, and he's like, no, I'm not American, and show him the badge, and then that's how he was saved from the wrath of the North Korean villagers. I mean, but that's how it really shows how much like the American pilots were hated back then by these people who were being brutalized by the American bombing campaign.
I don't think people here don't even know about the Plain of Jars. Like, they don't know anything. They know Vietnam, and then there's something happened in the Korean Peninsula, and now we hate China. That's pretty much the extent of what everybody knows.
And the thing about the Plain of Jar, people may have conceptually, or they may have heard Laos was the most bombed country in the world, but what they don't understand is when China went to Laos to build the high-speed rail a couple of years ago, they still have to clear all the unexploded ordnances from the Vietnam War. For all these American bombs, American left so much bomb on Laos. There were still, the landscape is dotted with unexploded ordnances that's killing children, crippled, maiming people. So when China went to build the high-speed rail, all along the way, they have to dig up all these American bombs that left unexploded. and treat them. So it's just another example of America bombs and China builds, right? I mean Indonesia. Indonesia now has a high-speed rail going
Yeah, well,
350 kilometer per hour. I mean, like
nobody wants to talk about Jakarta or what we did in Indonesia and Malaysia and all of that. Nobody wants to talk. All in the name of stopping communism. Let's destroy.
Yeah.
And we use those unexploded ordnance in Cambodia and Laos and all of those areas to keep ourselves inserted in there. We still do missions to go clean up the unexploded ordnance, and we're not really.
There was so much, like even I am surprised. Like I thought I'm pretty well versed in Asian history and stuff, and I was doing some research on the CIA airline based in Taiwan, what they call the civil air transport, and so I was surprised to find out in the 1950s. The CIA Airlines civil air transport, they actually had pilots to flew to Indonesia to bomb Indonesian airfields from Taiwan, and because in the 1950s, and of course they also ship weapons to the Golden Triangle in Myanmar and then fly out drugs, and that's another story. that's another. It's weird how whenever the American military turns up or when American CIA gets involved, there's always seemed to be a lot of drugs. Like that happened in Myanmar. That happened in that happened in the Golden Triangle, and then that happened in Afghanistan, and then
drugs. So what are you talking about?
Yeah, it's always funny how that works. Look, all these unaccounted money that's like you cannot be audited, and it can be diverted to black ops. I don't know why that happens, right?
No, nobody knows why there's huge drug trafficking lanes from the Balkans down into Afghanistan, down up into the Xinjiang.
Kosovo, like freaking Kosovo, like what NATO was doing peace mission to Kosovo for how many years? It's still freaking like the center of crime and drugs. How did that work? I mean, yeah.
And before I let you go, I know I've kept you long, but I have to. For area, I must ask about Zelensky's recent statement at Davos. The Chinese PM is not on my level. I'm wondering if he means that the China. I mean, I said yes, he's not on your level. He's like 17 rungs above you. But I'm wondering what your opinion is on this. Speaking of drugs, what your opinion is on this and how I'm kind of looking at Zelensky at this point. I think in the West we know he's a joke, but I'm wondering about
Zelensky is returning to his true form, right? His comedian style. He's returning back to his old, applying his old trade. I mean, like, look, nobody takes Zelensky seriously now in the West. I mean, even the America and the West is tired of him. You have freaking Times Magazine like featuring Zelensky saying he's totally delusional, think that West should extend to him unlimited support. I mean, he's been kicking off to the curb right now because you know what? I'm sorry, Ukraine. I mean, even Taiwan. Israel is a true golden child. Nobody can compete with Israel. I'm sorry. I mean, like, you have to take a back seat, Zelensky. I mean, as much as U.S. want to fuck with Russia, I'm sorry.
You can say fuck.
Yeah. As much as U.S. want to stick it to Russia, but Israel is still the golden boy. You know, that's Israel is America's precious, my precious. They can't. Sorry, Ukraine. Sorry, Taiwan. Like you guys have to take a number.
That's exactly what happened. And I was like, does he not realize that nobody comes before Israel? Because
did you see that when Zelensky trying to visit Israel and they told him no, and because they're like, no, you're not doing this. You're not trying to like rub off our spotlight. You know, you don't get to piggyback on our issue.
Yes, exactly. You can't come down here and ask for any attention. What are you talking about?
So Zelensky is right. He is not at the Chinese PM's level. Not at all.
He's not even at the Israeli PM's level at this
Yeah,
point.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
well, Carl, this has been one of the funniest episodes I think I've ever done, and you have got to come back. But please tell the listeners where they can find you. And I didn't even get to ask all of the questions I wanted to ask, but yes, please tell the audience where they can find you, and I'll give you guys that book recommendation.
So I'm a prolific shit poster, so you can find me on Twitter. My handle is just Carl Za, like a single Carl Za. And I do have a Patreon site because unfortunately, my Xi Jinping bucks has not arrived in the mail, so I have to support myself. So I do have a Patreon site. It's called the Silk and Steel Podcast. Just go to Patreon, search for Silk. It's the first thing that comes up. And yeah. I mean, I'm all about silk, right? Chinese, got to represent. And so Silk and Steel Podcast, where I do talk about everything about China, and but with a particular emphasis also on Chinese history, because that's my true passion. I'm doing a chronological retelling of Chinese history from all the way from like beginning, from prehistory. I have managed almost 100 episodes, and I am right now at the year 541 BC. So I have a long way to go, but I'm in no hurry. But I also talk about current events, obviously.
This is incredible because it's so funny. I just saw a poll that said, what is the most lied about country in the world? And China was overwhelmed. Even Americans, overwhelmingly the majority. Like, people are understanding that we don't know anything about China in the West. We really, really don't. And only when we're lucky enough for somebody to climb over the Great Firewall or to have talks with people like you, because China doesn't care. China doesn't care about their soft power. Their hard power is tremendous at this point. And I think that what you're doing is so important and so necessary because we don't know anything about it. And it really is the future. China is emerging as the leader of BRICS, meaning that they will be the leader of the multipolar world. So I thank you so much. There will be so many clips from this hilarious episode, and we will be inviting you back on tomorrow. I don't even know what's going on our schedule. Mark Sloboda is coming on at some point. I think it's Saturday. So we'll see you guys then. Thank you again, and we'll talk soon.
Invite me back anytime.
Oh,
love
God.
to talk.
That.
I love to talk.